Hello everyone. So apologies if you can hear the wind in the background, it's quite windy. So Lovecraft, the Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories. I read this in 2018, very early 2018, so it's been quite a while. The reason I've put this off, of course I've always had books to review, new books that I've just read to review. And there are also books that I read quite a while ago and I wanted to just do justice to and to make people aware of them. This one is different in a sense because I feel like if you take Krabinsky for example, that's just an unknown author that probably deserves to be more well known than he already is. Lovecraft is very much in the popular sphere, he's well known, it's the whole franchise. I hate the word franchise, but I feel like I couldn't really... Everyone knows Cthulhu and Dagon and Nyarlathotep and whatnot. He's on Reddit, he's on Weird Lit, and etc, etc. Everyone knows who Lovecraft is and what his stories are about. So I felt like I was kind of put off by that in terms of thinking of a new book to review. But I felt like because this is so inspirational in many respects and sort of influential, I thought I might as well just get to it. And I really am coming from this review as a sort of completionist mindset, where I just wanted not so much review it for the stories, but just so I can actually get off my chest and be like, what's the word? Well, just to have it reviewed essentially. Because I reviewed some books I didn't even enjoy that much, but then I definitely should have been reviewing a Lovecraft book at least. So perhaps you can see where I'm going with that. So I've read The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories, and I've read At the Mountains of Madness, the novella. So that's the only two Lovecraft things I've read. I think this is one of the biggest collections that he has out. That they put out for him, and it definitely includes the most important large tales, the Call of Cthulhu being the main one, Dagon, Nyarlathotep. Yeah, I think this is a really good starting point. The Outsider, The Colour Out of Space, yeah, these are definitely The Haunter of the Dark, The Shadow of Innsmouth. These are definitely the big ones, I think. This is the first thing I read from him, so... Yeah, so I'll just say that I've not actually even structured this review. I've just come out to this outbuilding, to this shelter, just to review this book. It's something to do, just to get it finally reviewed. I just want to talk about Lovecraft generally because it's definitely time that I should do that, I think. So let's just address the elephant in the room. He has some racist views. Everyone knows that. Doesn't really particularly bother me in the sense that it is what it is. I'm not going to stop reading him because of that. The thing that I find most annoying about Lovecraft, and I do have a love-hate relationship with him, and that's why I've only read 2 of his works, is that his prose is extremely tedious at points. Not only that, but his the endings to most of the stories basically boil down to this person is of a degenerate lineage. Oh no, it's terrible. That's what it comes down to. And I just rolled my eyes a lot of these stories, to be honest. I felt like there's no art to it. It's just Lovecraft writing what he thinks in terms of societal issues and racism and whatnot. And it's not. It takes you out of the story. But Lovecraft, I would say that he in terms of ranking, he sort of occupies a space several steps below. See, it's interesting because I was going to say he's below Blackwood. That's because I don't feel like Blackwood has as much influential imagery and language. For me anyway, I've only read a couple of novellas from Blackwood. I definitely think he's below Clark. Sorry about the noise. I definitely think he's far below Clark Ashton Smith and Dunsany by far. But he is up there as obviously one of the weird writers, one of the masters in a sense. So really, I think when I think of Lovecraft, it's weird because I was always sort of confused by him. Me and my brother and my friend, we're always we knew about Lovecraft and about the gods and about Azathoth and Cthulhu, of course, all the different beings in the mythos, but we were never quite sure. And I was the first one to read Lovecraft, and I finally understand what he was about. And we were always kind of put off by him because we didn't really like the whole investigative aspect, where it felt a bit campy sometimes. Just these detectives, how madness takes over them, and they just scream at the end of the stories, and it's just, yeah, that's just how the denouements work every time. Of course, that isn't the case all the time, but that's what we felt it was like. It's one of those things where it's like Azathoth and the great Yog-Sothoth and all that. But then you have these more domestic scenes with detectives and whatnot. It just seems a little bit. We weren't quite interested in that aspect of it. We were very interested in the chaotic gods seething out in the cosmos and whatnot. But so yeah, Lovecraft, he definitely feels akin to the writing that I used to do when I was a lot younger. Used to be interested in sort of chaotic gods and the type of sort of the Warhammer sort of pantheon, I suppose. I used to do a lot of sort of very, very high fantasy stories. He sort of is, I guess he's very much connected to that. Now the first story, Dagon, and I should say a lot of these stories I knew beforehand before reading them from the band Nile. If you're aware of them, a sort of death metal band, they cover a lot of really in-depth Lovecraft stories, and Dagon is the subject of one such song. Dagon is the first story, and it's definitely one of the best. It's by far, and the ending is probably one of my favourite sections in just fiction, really, because it gives me goosebumps just reading it. And the song that I mentioned before, it's kind of it takes the words from the ending of Dagon, sort of changes them up a little bit, but it's quite similar actually. It's really, really profound and epic. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transience surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not have all been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind, of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand, the window. Got goosebumps actually, because that's reading the ending to that, I definitely remembered the lyrics to this Nile song that I mentioned. It's very similar, and that ending there really does. It's influential in a number of aspects. One of them is that another one is, I should say, is that of anthropocentrism or anti-anthropocentrism. That's really played a big part in my stories, at least. It's stories like, just skipping on a bit, it's stories like facts concerning Arthur Jermyn and his, if that's how you pronounce it, and his family that I cannot remember at all. I'm sure it's one of those lineage stories. I'm noticing Africa here. Yeah, I'm not particularly interested in those ones, I'm afraid. So I remember, I'm really discovering this as I go, really. I remember Steliphius, if that's how you pronounce it, although it's one of his more fantastical stories. I think it's the Dunsany story. Lovecraft was influenced by Dunsany in part, and I think it's quite evocative, as if I remember correctly, but it suffers from that thing of just spamming out names, and it has that sense of he's putting out names to make it seem like there's more depth than there really is. I think, for example, Kurenes had awaked the very moment he beheld the city, yet he knew from his brief glance that it was none other than Celephius in the valley of Uth Nargai beyond the Denarian hills. There's no real sense of we don't know where that is. It's just words, just things that happen to be there because we need a sense of depth. It's not like Tolkien or any of the true sort of authentic world builders. It's when we get to stories like Nyarlathotep that's really just absolutely astonishingly good, I think. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, I am the last, I will tell the audient void. I think when I was a lot younger, if I read this when I was maybe 18 or 19, I would have just adored this. I still do enjoy it. It's just sometimes it can be a little bit cringy. I sort of want more of a human aspect to it now. I think we need a bit more introspection, just something more than, not to say that there isn't introspection in Lovecraft, but something more than just putting out these epic sounding words. Of course that's to get across the sense of the unknowable. I just think that my sort of sensibilities have sort of changed in reading, I think. Nyarlathotep is about this exotic figure that comes down to mankind to give secrets, to impart this sort of arcane knowledge. Very atmospheric. It's set in Egypt, if I remember correctly, and it's just the ending especially. I don't usually read the endings to stories, but I think again everyone knows Lovecraft and everyone knows the stories, so I will read the end of this. So this end passage is phenomenal. It just, the way it sounds, and I'll just skip a little bit though because it sort of goes on a little bit. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. What I love about that passage is that it just goes layer upon layer upon layer, level upon level upon level. The fact there's such power to it. Unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping, whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods. I don't think anyone does sort of dark epicness better than Lovecraft. Perhaps Clark Ashton Smith comes close. So I'm kind of just skipping some stories here, just having fun with this a little bit, just looking at revisiting favourite stories. The Outsider. This one feels akin to Frankenstein, and the end to this story is was the inspiration for the band Nile. There's just a lot of lyrics here that connect with the band. The Outsiders. I'm skipping. I'm reading parts of the text here, and I just love the words. Sometimes I can scan over a page, and I can feel. What's the word? I get a real sense of the aesthetic of the story, if that makes any sense. So maybe like synesthesia. Decay, antiquity, eidolon, unwholesome revelation, abhorrent, abomination, bitterness of alienage. But in the cosmos there is balm as well as bitterness, and that balm is nepenthe. In the supreme horror of that second I forgot what had horrified me, and the burst of black memory vanished in a chaos of echoing images. In a dream I fled from that haunted and accursed pile, and ran swiftly and silently in the moonlight. When I returned to the churchyard's place of marble, and went down the steps, I found the stone trapdoor immovable. but I was not sorry, for I had hated the antique castle in the trees. Now I ride with the mocking and friendly ghouls on the night wind, and play by day amongst the catacombs of Nefren Ka, in the sealed and unknown valley of Hadoth by the Nile. I know that light is not for me, save that of the moon over the rock tombs of Neb, nor any gaiety save the unnamed feast of Nitocris beyond the Great Pyramid. Yet in my new wildness and freedom, I almost welcome the bitterness of alienage. That's actually, I'm going on about it quite a lot, but that's the Catacombs of Nefren Ka is an album by Nile. So yeah, just got goosebumps again, really. I turned the page to Herbert West Reanimator, and yeah, I'm not particularly. I don't think I was engaged at the time of reading this. I don't really like those sort of campy stories. I mean, even the title sounds campy. I think this was a struggle to read. Just not my sort of style. Yeah, obviously, he was probably just having fun with it, but yeah, for me, it's not. It doesn't really do much. So there are a lot of stories here that I've had to kind of skip because I don't quite remember them. There's the festival, which again is another sort of lineage one. I think that's set in Massachusetts in the 1500s, I think. Sort of Puritan sort of period, I think. So that might be completely wrong. The Rats in the Walls. I know that The Rats in the Walls is a masterwork of horror fiction. Really quite anxiety inducing. I just felt like I needed to review this because, as I say, just those stories in this collection that I know and that are familiar and iconic, they have definitely stuck with me, and I feel like everyone should read them at some point if they like weird fiction and horror. Cool Air I remember as being a sort of quite a good one actually. Lovecraft is a curious one because he seems to do fantastical dungeony stories, he seems to do straight horror, and then he also does almost sci-fi in a way. A lot of his stories, I think even Whisper in Darkness, which I'll get to, is I think even that has scientific elements as well. He has a lot of he has detectives, sci-fi contraptions, he has fantastical imagery and dreams. Quite a lot of stuff here. Now, the Call of Cthulhu. Of course, we all know Cthulhu. This is just incredible. This is obviously one of the best ones, and I noticed there's actually an epilogue from Algernon Blackwood, which is quite good. I don't think I was aware of him at the time. A shame. Cthulhu Fatagan. This is just a masterwork. The sense of this expedition on this ship. And I think it really encapsulates everything that Lovecraft did. It's brilliant. Naglui Miclanafa Cthulhu Rilye Wagnagel Fatagan. In his house at Rilye, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. There's a Nile song about Cthulhu. When the stars in their endless turning assume the angles of the same rays they shed down, then does Rilye rise. I think that's the lyric, just off the top of my head. Upwards from the House of Cthulhu, I think. Yeah, the great old ones. This is where the mythos really begins. It's just sentences like this. It's just the nightmare corpse city of Rilye that was built in measureless aeons behind history by the vast loathsome shapes that seep down from the dark stars. Cthulhu and his hordes hidden in green slimy vaults and sending out at last after cycles incalculable the thoughts that spread fear to the dreams of the sensitive and called imperiously to the faithful to come on a pilgrimage of liberation and restoration. Monolith crowned citadel whereon great Cthulhu was buried. Awed by the cosmic majesty of this dripping Babylon of elder demons. Dizzying height of the great carven monolith. It's just incredible. The Colour Out of Space, I think that is definitely one of the best stories in the collection. It's well known as I think this is definitely one of the most iconic Lovecraft stories, and it is truly a masterwork. I remember being really gripped by this, and the unknowableness of this colour, if you can even call it that. And I think it's this farmhouse that's infecting the crops, I think, and there's this well through which the colour appears, I think. Again, very hazy, but it's been years now, of course. But it's just incredible. His imagination. I think a film was made out of this, I'm not quite sure. The Whisper in Darkness is perhaps one of my favourites, definitely in the top 3, I think, because of this section here. So there's a cryptic, I won't really go into the story other than this, there's cryptic mentions of the Black Goat of the Woods and Shub-Niggurath and Nyarlathotep and just all these different deities and entities that we don't know about, and it just seemed to be unknowable and indecipherable. I'll just read parts of this. A cultivated male human voice saying, "Is the Lord of the Woods even to, and the gifts of the men of Leng. So from the wells of night to the gulfs of space, and from the gulfs of space to the wells of night, ever the praises of great Cthulhu, of Sithogwa and of him who is not to be named. Ever the praises and abundance to the Black Goat of the Woods, Ea, Shub-Niggurath, the goat with 1,000 young." A buzzing imitation of human speech. Ea, Shub-Niggurath, the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young, switching then to a human voice. And it has come to pass that the Lord of the Woods, being 7 and 9 down the onyx steps, tributes to him in the gulf, Azathoth, he of whom thou hast taught us marvels, on the wings of night, out beyond space, out beyond the space, to that whereof Yuggoth is the youngest child, rolling alone in black ether at the rim. I've got goosebumps just reading this. The onyx steps, 7 and 9, the Lord of the Woods, Azathoth, Yuggoth. A buzzing voice then says, "Go out among men and find the ways thereof, that he in the gulf may know." I'm sure you're aware by now that I adore archaic language like that. It just gives me goosebumps all the time. To Nyarlathotep, mighty messenger, must all things be told, and he shall put on the semblance of men, the waxen mask and the robe that hides, and come down from the world of 7 suns to mock. This really puts me in mind of Dunsany's Pagana stories, and the very beginnings of Dunsany's Pagana stories. You can tell, I think he was trying to emulate sort of Manayut Sushai and all that. Then at last a human voice says, "Nyarlathotep, great messenger, bringer of strange joy to Yuggoth from the void, through the void, father of the million favoured ones, stalker among," and then it cuts off. So you can see just how weighty this language is and just how ritualistic and archaic it is. It's just brilliant. As for the actual story of the Whisper in Darkness itself, I really did enjoy this. I have vivid imagery of the protagonist meeting this figure sitting on a chair in the darkness, and that's all I'll say really. I've probably given too many spoilers already, but I hope you can just see, if you've not encountered Lovecraft, just the language here I think that's what you read it for. Of course, people have, and I do have as well, problems with some of the density of the language and the sort of purple prose, waning gibbous moon and all that sort of stuff. It's just does get on your nerves sometimes. However, I'm just reading through this, just parsing the text, just sort of enjoying revisiting it, and I'm not finding too much of that at the minute. I think At the Mountains of Madness is one where it just feels like a technical document, and it just hurts the eyes to read sometimes. But these are good though. The Shadow over Innsmouth, another really good one. There's good amount of stories in here, good amount of good stories, I should say. So this one really gets the feeling of alienation across. It's about this man who goes on a journey via bus, I believe, to the town or city of Innsmouth, and there are some cultish goings on to do with fish beings and whatnot. Lovecraft, obviously, you're probably aware of this. Lovecraft, his imagery focuses a lot on the sort of amphibian sort of realm. That's another one. It feels this is I believe this has connections to Dagon. I think it's a really good one. It's another masterful one that really gets the sense of alienation across, and this one man against this town, I think, is what I'll say. And just skipping through this, there's a lot of pages to these some of these stories. They're actually novellas, quite in depth stories actually. Just skipping through this, Shadow of Innsmouth is quite substantial. The Haunter of the Dark is another brilliant story. I have skipped ones that I have no interest in, but there are a lot of these stories that I definitely enjoyed. The Haunter of the Dark, another story with incredible language. From what I remember, it's about Robert Blake, I think. He may be based off Robert Bloch, if I remember correctly, the author. I'm sure you Lovecraft fanatics are shaking their heads right now. This one, if I remember correctly, it's about a writer or an artist who is staring out over this hill, looking at a church, and I think it's steeple, where he's fascinated by this building, and he eventually goes there and uncovers this secret artifact, the trapezohedron, I think it is. And I do love Lovecraft in terms of his imagery and his language, and he's everywhere. And when I say trapezohedron, I immediately think of a band, a black metal band, that has the word shining trapezohedron in the lyrics. So that's a good way of making me remember Lovecraft in a sense. I know some of these are spoilers, definitely spoilers, but I can't help but read this last section. I am Robert Blake, but I see the tower in the dark. There's a monstrous odour, senses transfigured, boarding at that tower window, cracking and giving way. Ia, Nagai, Egg. I see it, coming here, hell wind, titan blur, black wings, Yog-Sothoth save me, the three-lobed burning eye. So that was H.P. Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories. A little bit more of a rambly review, just a kind of a trip down memory lane, I think, for that one. I probably will end up reviewing The Mountains of Madness, since it's a coherent, shorter narrative, a sort of standalone narrative that I can remember fairly well, just because it's a singular story. I definitely recommend H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories. Just be aware that there is obviously problematic language, and there is it's quite dense language. Beautiful language, but dense. So I'm not entirely sure what review I'm going to do next. I seem to be struggling with that sometimes. I might get into some of the classic books, maybe Hunger by Knut Hamsun, or Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. There are various other stories, fantasies, etc. I might even review Narcissus and Goldmund. There's just various books to review. So anyway, another review for you. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.